Hello fellow teaching peers, and welcome to my presentation today for Assessment Task 2, Engaging Students in Learning Mathematics. I will begin this presentation today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of this land, in which upon this virtual meeting is taking place, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. This presentation will focus on the selection of 2 teaching resources that have been chosen to aid students in engaging in a specific mathematical area of the geometry and measurement strand. This will be delivered by a brief overview of the substrand shapes, followed by learner diversity, barriers to learning, and common misconceptions. Afterwards, I will explore the 2 chosen resources that will interconnect with both the substrand of year 3 cohort and certain strategies that will enable learners to be guided and supported through a mixture of ICTs or information and communication technologies. If you have any questions throughout the presentation today, please feel free to raise your hand at any time. Thank you. The intention of the presentation is to share 2 carefully planned resources that will scaffold students' understanding in regards to the Australian curriculum's mathematical strand, geometry and measurement, and substrand, shapes. The geometry and measurement strand of the Australian curriculum work hand in hand to support students' understanding and knowledge of size, shape, relative position, and movement of 2-dimensional figures in the plane and 3-dimensional objects in space. Australian Curriculum, Assessment and Reporting Authority 2021. This in turn is branched out to support learners as they engage in Year 3 content descriptor, make models of 3-dimensional objects, and describe key features. Learner diversity. What is learner diversity and how can we help? According to authors Churchill et al. 2012, student diversity refers to learners that come into a classroom inclusive of learner home values, perspectives, learning characteristics, and needs. Each student that comes into your classroom is armed with a unique set of skills, basis of how they think and form and make connections to the learning materials. An example of learner diversity relates to cultural background, socioeconomic status, learning needs, and exceptional ability. In terms of teaching core content such as mathematics, it is essential that educational professionals acknowledge and provide equitable educational opportunities that scaffold and foster each student's own unique perspectives. This can be employed by the identification of learner characteristics, styles, preferences, and strengths and barriers to learning, especially in regard to making adjustments or modifications to learning content. Barriers to learning. What are barriers to learning, and why do we need to make adjustment or modifications? As students range from a variety of backgrounds and needs, therein lays opportunities for differentiated instruction. The employment of differentiated instruction stems from the adjustment of learning that may be indicated by certain gaps or barriers in understanding and learning. For example, low socioeconomic background in conjunction with lack of parental guidance or sustained discussion about mathematical experiences and knowledge may inhabit a sense of unimportance for the skill sets required for learning mathematics, especially in terms of connecting early years learning to those required in primary and secondary education. There are many additional influences or contextual causes that pose potential capacity to relate to. Thus, it remains the teacher's way to become informed and knowledgeable of inclusive ways to represent learning in the classroom. One integral theory of learning is supported by Maslow's hierarchy of school needs, which focuses on 5 categories of needs that form the foundation for each learner. These needs indicate what learners require in terms of forming effective connections to what they are being taught. Common misconceptions. The term misconceptions come from knowledge that has been gathered or honed in a manner that has raised misinformed information, thus forming the term misconceptions. An area that can cause major barriers in mathematics, where meaningful connections between conceptual understanding and procedural fluency is necessary to form connections. Reyes et al., 2016. In regard to learning geometric shapes, one particularly common barrier can be in the form of imagining or visualizing the dimensions in three-dimensional planes. This is especially common when there has been limited exposure or experience with concrete learning materials and diminutive learning of spatial awareness, two-dimensional and three-dimensional area awareness as well. Therefore, to avoid further confusion, learners require early intervention, right from the commencement of early education. With early childhood education, teachers provide explicit links between 3D shapes and objects and 2D shape representations. The State of Queensland, Queensland Studies Authority, 2005. I'd like to take a moment. If you do have any questions at all, please feel free to raise your hand. Okay. Resources for learning. In relation to Maslow's hierarchy of school needs and critical reflection of common misconceptions and barriers to learning, I've chosen 2 resources that would support a Year 3 cohort that are studying the substrand of geometry and measurement, content descriptor, make models of 3-dimensional objects, and describe key features. The primary context of these resources relate to learners that are being impacted by barriers such as low socioeconomic standing, or SES, and the gradual delay in their learning due to factors such as learning environment in a home setting and parental influences that may disrupt the way learners connect to mathematics via everyday informal conversations and routines such as shopping, mealtime discussions, or perhaps travel. Throughout the planning of these 2 resources, I've developed ways in which the resources can be connected to the home environment in order to support continuity of learning, regardless of economic standing, as well as ensuring comprehension of mathematical language and geometric properties of 2-dimensional representations and 3-dimensional objects and shapes. This is the first resource. So resource 1 is 2D and 3D object profile, and it comes along with geometric solids and Play-Doh. This was adapted from an excellent teaching resource website, Teacher Starter, which I'm sure you've all been quite aware of. The initial aspect of the Teaching Starter program, I selected this resource. It's structured beautifully. The clarity and the instructions were what initially caught my eye. Next, it was noted that the resource could be structured as a summative assessment. However, I thought that it would make an effective platform for both observing where each student was currently standing in terms of 3-dimensional knowledge and shapes, whilst also engaging them in hands-on, visually engaging activity. The first step of conceptualizing the resource was to redesign certain aspects to include pictorial and visual aids. The small images of the 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional shapes, although small in quantity, the intention was to capture the students' thought processes and propel their thinking forward to other shapes that they could possibly create. Underneath their profile, I included a set of written instructions as a means for consolidating understanding. This idea was to ensure that each child or student understood exactly what the activities set instructions indicated, especially in terms to ELD students who may require further details for the activity task. Deconstruction of Resource 1. As the resource was comprehensively reviewed, it was determined that some learners may have barriers to conceptualizing understanding as a result of contextual factors such as limited exposure or experience with concrete materials. Therefore, 2 further concrete resources were included in the task. These additional tools included geometric solids, which are fun and reliable for measuring and comparing volume, as well as easy to fill so that capacity can be filled with any liquid or dry material. They are also sensory safe and come in sets of either 12 or 16. The other supporting tool comes in the form of Play-Doh, a simple yet engaging way to enhance student understanding of geometric properties. The best part of this tool is that it's affordable and easy to make. I added an ingredients and method making plan at the bottom of the laminated profile sheet as a way for engaging students to be able to take home their learning and experiment while they're away from the classroom environment. Specifically for students from an SES background, the practicality and affordability of the activity would allow them to interchange their learning between school and home, a great way to continuously hone and practice their knowledge of geometric shapes, as well as overcome barriers to staying informed and involved learners. Resource 2. The second resource incorporated the uses of ICTs, or information and communication technologies, a crucial aspect of learning in this ever-evolving world. Our students today enjoyed a variety of technological games and other applications. It becomes necessary to ensure that education comprises of digital technologies that align with the Australian curriculum general capabilities of information and communication technologies. Information and communication technologies, or ICTs, are formally utilised within countless aspects of learning. ICTs form essential components of learning via processes of accessible information, creation and presentation, problem solving, and further areas of skills and development. In relation to learning shape, digital technologies can provide an outlook for dynamic opportunities for interactive examination of core learning. In regard to shape, learners can become immersed in a world of visual imagery, where practical, symbolic, and linguistic connections can be made at the click of a button. This particular digital tool was selected as a suggestion from the Australian Curriculum Lessons, describing the online shape game as a remote lesson tool for allowing students to explore both two-dimensional and three-dimensional shapes. Australian Curriculum Lessons 2020. Through this online game, developed by Shepherd Software, and it was also independently created through a platform called Smash Maths, learners would be provided with options for levels of learning what would take place, like to engage in interactive sounds, colours, and encouraging digital effects. Further to this, the online resource is free to use at any time. In the case of learners who may not have access to technologies at home, schools are becoming dependable on setting up loans for tablets, as well as ensuring that students have access to digital tools whilst at school, like a library setting. As we closely examine the second resource, you may notice learning engagement, wherein the three facets of three personal components of engagement can be categorized as behavioral, emotional, and cognitive. Aspects of the engagement framework are incorporated by the use of interactive virtual nature of the online resource for learning. The primitives of the resource include relaxed and competitive options of engagement. The resource link opens up to 2 pages that provides for options to play: basic shapes, shapes rotate, shapes plus more shapes, and 3D shapes. Once selected, the gamer is provided options such as relaxed mode or timed mode. During these selected sessions, learners will be immersed in a visual area of colours and shapes. These games can be repeated and shared, as well as printed as a form of evidential trademark of learner achievement. At the bottom of the screen, you may have noticed there's a star with the words in it, "Click me to play." I will provide some time after this presentation for a brief visit of this online resource. I've also provided printed copies of this presentation containing links to the online tool, as well as other learning resources that have been presented today. I hope you have all enjoyed this presentation thus far and have found the 2 resources for learning to be creditable for your future learning and planning. My intention for today was to share my ongoing professional knowledge building and share my passion for developing resources that are effective and engaging to students in their learning processes. If you have any questions at this time, please feel free and do not hesitate to ask. Thank you.